I got the right jacket when we went to the Witches Market in La Paz, Bolivia. Gloria had given her own conventions, don't let them go buy something crazy like that. So she took the situation seriously. And she stood there as I was being fitted by the band, and we were going in broken English, broken Spanish to make sure I did all of the right things. And then the salesman turned to Gloria, Gloria wasn't there.
You're on the line.
With my other wife,
Every- Anytime she needs
and said, "Y por su esposa," and for your wife. And there I was caught. We think of that, and we thought, this is one of the most incredible women you will ever meet. I've got a thing here to tell you about. I'm not even going to use it. This is a woman who puts the R in Rotary. She's done it. She's done it with her late husband, who was one of the men of all times. She's done it with so many of us, either on trips like that or personally, because we just love the daylights out of here. So I'm proud to have two wonderful spouses, only one of which I sleep with. Rhonda was born in, what town in Ohio? Girard?
Girard, Ohio, near Youngstown and near Pittsburgh, so it's kind of on the map.
So she's an Ohioan. I went to school in Ohio, so we've had those Ohio ties. But she is a woman who just simply is lovely, 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 lovely. You can't meet her, you cannot spend any time with her without just feeling that this has been a time well spent. I was told to keep it short, so I'm going to. All I'm going to say is, not only is she a lovely person, but as of this year, she is a legitimate author.
That's right.
Very shortly, a book called Enchanting Bhutan. When is it being published? Is it out now?
Valentine's Day.
Valentine's Day, okay. And are you going to be at Park Road Books by any chance?
We'll have to contact. them.
Okay, I know somebody there. I'll be glad to contact them.
We'll work a deal on it,
Okay.
whatever your deal.
And if not, we certainly could have a signing along ourselves if we don't work that out.
Hey, so John, thanks so much for your kind introduction. You were so sweet to do that.
Thank you,
And I love
John.
you too.
Kevin,
Yes,
did you move that screen over just a little bit?
which way?
That way.
Tell me, Liz.
You're not.
Maybe, somewhere. Yeah. John, could you scoot this way just a little bit? Your head's like blocking just a little.
Is this okay?
Yeah, thank you. We want to make sure you're on screen.
Okay, or my grandmother. Okay. I'm deeply touched really by seeing my wonderful friends that have been with me throughout my life and through Clyde's life. And you are so dear to me, and the people that are in this Rotary now that are younger, Terry and Rebecca and Rosemary. I went to the party and I've known her for years, but she treated me with so much kindness at the Rotary party that she has just woven herself into a part of my heart too. The other part that I'm delighted about as far as today's concerned is to see my brother Brett and my sister Diane. We became siblings when Clyde and Brett were in practice together. And Clyde and Brett had the same relationship as Clyde and I had at home. And Diane had let me say this way. Brett has my personality, so he had our marriage in the office with Brett. Diane has Clyde's personality, so Red had Diane in the office, so the two of them were married at home and then they were married at the office. So we shared so much over the years, and we became so close, and so today I consider Red as my brother and Diane as my sister because we've got long journey
Thank you.
together and a beautiful journey together.
Thank you, Barbara.
The program that I'm presenting today has two parts to it. I want to talk about the thing that's closest to my heart is Bhutan. And then I also want to talk about all the trips that this group of people, all the Dennis and their wives and Joe came along and Frank came along, the Rotarians that joined the Dennis in the projects that we did in South America, which were phenomenal. In Bolivia, I wrote down the dates that Karen Gaglianos had this memory of the dates, otherwise I'd be lost. We first went to Bolivia in 1989, then we went back in 1991, 1992, 1994, 1996, 1998, and then after that, there were 2 trips to Ecuador and a trip to Honduras that David talked about last week about building the houses for Habitat for Humanity. So there is so much in that whole list of places where we went, and we spent about a week working. The dentist did dentistry on the children and satellite orphanages. And in Cochabamba, Bolivia, they had so many people who couldn't afford to take care of their children. So they set up satellite orphanages all around the city, which is about 200,000 people at that time. The very old missionaries took it upon themselves to had set values that were in this stair step of orphanages. When children came in and they were very young, like parents would abandon their child when they were on the bus, for instance. The child would wake up from a nap, no parent was there. So they people in Cochabamba knew about the satellite orphanages, and so they would take the child to the orphanage. The orphanage would in turn try to find the parents so that they would have the children during the day and send them home to their parents at night, so that they would be fed and educated and taken care of, but would have that liaison with their parents as well. I thought it was masterful the way they designed the orphanages, because they had about 5 different levels. And the youngest ones were just small children, just 2-year-olds, young children, and they had a nursery program for them. And then they had a little bit older children that were in a different group. And they worked themselves up, and the key value that was in moving up through the levels of the orphanages was that they gave the children more and more and more responsibilities. So by the time they got to the top level, I remember going to one of the top level orphanages there at the in Cochabamba, and those young people had built the tables that were in the meeting rooms. They had planted a garden. They had provided centerpieces for all the tables. In other words, they had learned actual working skills. And by the time we left Cochabamba, Kate was reminding me that they stayed in a high-rise hotel that was partially built by those young people that had gotten to that highest level and learned those skills to help build a high-rise building. You know, the technical aspects of it, electricity, woodworking, all the different things, they learned along the way. And from my perspective, I think as a parent, I feel like all those little children were my own, and that they were nurtured so well on their movement. But there was a catch to their being in the orphanages. In order to move up in the levels of responsibility, they had to commit to being a part of that program. So children, especially young boys off the street, there were a lot of street young people. And they would tell them, they went out and we got to witness this one night where they had food that they took to the young people who were just on the street and that had no way to even provide food for themselves. They took out a truck or a trailer or a big car or something, but they had milk and bread on the back of that, and they would feed those young people. And while they were doing the feeding, they were also inviting them to come to stay in a place where they had safety in those orphanages, would have a roof over their head, and they would have food, and they would also be taught lifetime skills. So it was a fantastic program and something that as Rotarians, we were so excited, and to be a part of all of those, the aspects of it was such a privilege. And the thing that Clyde and I both believed was that, and maybe you all could agree with this, I think you probably will, that when we did those, we went down there for maybe a week or little over a week's time, and then we'd take a side trip for recreation. But we always felt that we were getting way more than we gave. And because it was so gratifying, and to see those people and to be interacting with them was just soulful joy. You couldn't have anything better than that. I want to say that the genesis, I was thinking about this morning, the genesis of all those trips and all the different things that Clyde did with Rotary. He was a combination of David and Kendrick, let's see, Kevin, thank you, Kevin Kendrick. He was the two of them on steroids. Honestly, when I met him, he was absolutely the funniest, smartest person that I have never met in my life. And I discovered over the time that we were dating that he had a heart of gold. And so the thing that happened when Clyde and I was that when our children were young, they were 6 and 4. We had Eric, the older one, was mild-mannered Clark Kent, just obedient from the time we came out of the womb. Oh yeah, mommy, I'll take my feeding now and all this sort of thing. And then along came Kurt with a tiger in his tank. And at 4 years old, he was throwing himself to the floor, having temper tantrums, throwing everything under the sun. And what happened was that, fortunately, Clyde and I had the opportunity to, when we needed it desperately, we went for counseling. And when we did that, they suggested that Clyde and I go on a date night, find a date night, and talk to each other so that we could get our two parenting styles to mesh. Well, Clyde was raised by I want to say a dictator. His mother was so harsh and so commanding and so just really harsh for Clyde when he was growing up. And in my case, my father died when I was 2, and we children were 10 days old. I was 2, my sister was 3, my brother was 5, and my poor mom was left with us 4 kids and had no experience working and had to raise us, and a parent went to work eventually. And so what happened for us, all four of us in our family, was that we love our mom so much because she sacrificed so much for us. And so she didn't have any rules for us in the house. We all behaved and we did what we were supposed to because we cared so much about our mother. And we didn't want her to have any more of a burden than she already had. So here I was with no rules for the kids. I didn't have any idea how to set boundaries for them. And here's Clyde with the dictator of a process going on. So what it became between Clyde and I is our relationship became closer and closer and closer, so that he became a benevolent dictator. And I became a person who knew how to set boundaries. And I didn't fit in, I never did go to the dictator aspect, but Clyde showed me how to set boundaries because I asked him what his boundaries were. I said, how did you do that, Clyde? And so I learned how to set up a system for the kids. When they came home from school, the first thing they did was they got their snack, and then they sat down and did their homework, and then they could go outside and play. That was new for me. I had no idea they could structure things like that. So I thought, hey, this is good. Get the chocolate chip cookies ready for them, And thankfully, I can say that as much as I dearly love Clyde, our sons are phenomenal. They're wonderful young men, and their wives are wonderful, and they're just young men that I am so proud of. And Clyde and my combination that are melding in our close relationship and our marriage is what carried the day. So now let me move on to the place that's really dear to my heart. I'm going to talk first about Bhutan, and then I'm going to talk about South America. But among those trips between after Bolivia, there were 2 trips to Ecuador, one to Honduras to build habitat homes, and then Clyde got a grant from the Rotary Fund for us to go to Zimbabwe, Africa, for a month-long trip. And the experience of ours, internationally, came from an organization that we were in with Brett and Diane, that we wanted to bring about the cooperation of all races and nations and religions in the world. That was the umbrella idea of the group that we were part of. And so everything that we did combined Rotary with our love for humanity. So in regard to Bhutan, the reason that I'm putting that first is, and I wrote a book about it, is that it was a life-changing experience to go to Bhutan. Bhutan is the only, it is the only country like it on the whole planet. And the reason that I'm saying that is
On the whole planet.
they are an all Buddhist country, so they are, the 2 tenets of Buddhism are compassion and kindness to your fellow man. And they live that. When you're in that country, you feel it from every person that's Bhutanese. They're sharing their hearts with you and their love for you and their kindness. So we felt it's a whole different environment. And what happened in Bhutan is that they had a king that was so benevolent that they would make a 5-year plan for the country and a 10-year plan for the country. And in the United States, we can't even make a 10-minute plan, a 10-year plan. But they would go out, and the king went out to the villages of Bhutan and would ask the people what they thought. Well, Nepal is right beside Bhutan in the Himalayan mountains, and India is south of that. So in Nepal and Mount Everest, there has been overclimbed, just overclimbed, too many people, too much climbing. So they look at Bhutan next door, it's pristine. 70% of the country is planted in trees. They've got carbon negative as far as their atmosphere, because they have so many trees and they won't cut them down. And they care so much about the environment as well as the people, to the point that gross national happiness is how they measure their quality of life rather than gross national product. So it's a phenomenal country. You think that I hope you can feel my enthusiasm for them, because they do it so differently. But the king went around the country in this process of setting up rules for what they would do in Bhutan. And he went to the mountain people particularly, because up there they had yak herders, and they wanted to talk to them because they were next to those mountains. So the king asked them about climbing in the mountains of Bhutan, should we do that? And the yak herder said, well, these mountains are sacred to us. And so the king said, no climbing. They do not have any climbing in Bhutan, but they now have hiking. And Sonam, I have to say who Sonam is. Ugan was the name of our guide who guided us through Bhutan during the 3 weeks we went there to install a second dental clinic for them. They had one in the capital city, and then Clyde spent an entire year writing to dental companies to get donations of equipment and supplies to set up the second dental clinic in Bhutan. And in between that, I have to say that it was 1989 was our first trip to Bolivia, and it was after that that Clyde started soliciting money for donations and equipment so we could go to Bhutan for our next trip. He found out from the United Nations that there were several countries that needed help with dental care, and Bhutan was the one that we went, where's Bhutan? That's interesting, you know? So we're looking up to see where in the world the place is, and it's so intriguing. We were going like, oh yeah, we want to go there. It was so exciting to think of this place that was, to me, it felt like Shangri-La, because I had read James Hilton's book, what is his book on, Lost Horizon. Lost Horizon, and he talks about the High Lama in the Lost Horizon, and it became a really sort of hokey movie, but you meet the High Lama, and then all these mystical things start to happen in this place and everything. And I thought, gosh, Bhutan, that sounds like the Lost Horizon. I could go there and be immersed with the High Lama and meet these mystical people. That sounded great to me. So I was so anticipating that. When we got there, we had Ugan as our guide for 3 weeks while we were trying to set up the dental clinic. And we had Ugan's wife was the nurse to the Queen Mother of Bhutan, which means she was the king's mother. And we got an in with the Queen Mother because of Ugan and his wife knowing us. So over time, we got to have an audience with the Queen Mother. And then over time, every time we went back to Bhutan, which was 5 times at least, and maybe 6, I would be invited by the Queen Mother to go see her again. Clyde and I at first, and then she invited me the last time. And that was such an honor and a privilege to meet this woman that is so esteemed in other countries, and other people recognize her and all of this. It was just an incredible, out of this world privilege.
So no.
So anyway, and the thing that I wanted you to know was, where is that picture? I wanted to tell you that how colorful the Bhutanese culture is, because with the book that I wrote, there's a version that, no, this is fine. With the version that I wrote, there's a hardback which has pictures, and there's a paperback that has no pictures. And with Amazon, where the book's being printed, they only, if you put 1 picture in, it's the same price as if you put 35 pictures in. So we put a lot of pictures. My best pictures of Bhutan are with the publisher right now, but I'm going to show you some pictures of Bhutan. And then I'm going to go to the pictures of Bolivia after that. But this picture right here is of the National Shrine of Bhutan, and it's called Tiger's Nest. It's a monastery that is built into the side of a mountain in Bhutan. And the story behind it is that Guru Rinpoche flew into Bhutan on the back of a tiger, and he brought Buddhism to Bhutan from Tibet. And Clyde and I made a trip to Tibet one time after we were in Bhutan, and Tibet actually does not exist anymore. When the Chinese moved into Tibet, they put the monks and the nuns in the jails, and they destroyed all the monasteries, and they made rules that you have to speak Chinese to get a job. And they intermarried with the population, because then you would be able to have they didn't have enough women in China, so they were marrying the Tibetans. So it's heartbreaking, but there's no Tibet there. However, Bhutan has become Tibet, because it is this beautiful country. It's more beautiful than Tibet, actually. And the reason that it's so beautiful is, as I said, it's like a national park because they have all the trees. But this is a doorway in Bhutan where they put, like, we stayed at a guest house where the king had stayed. And they put that kind of a beautiful, colorful curtain over the door, and some of the other doors were painted beautifully and just as bright as this. And then the people's dress is, they have a national dress in Bhutan. So when you get off the airplane, you're immersed in the culture, because you see the people in the national dress. The women have a floor length to the ankle dress that they wear. And the men wear a thing that's sort of, you'll see in the pictures, looks like a men's robe down to their knees, and they wear knee socks and leather shoes. But to walk into that country and to see the national dress, to see all those incredible, from the top part of Bhutan to the bottom, it's probably 100 miles, but you have mountains as almost as high as Mount Everest. And then down on the border of India, it's jungle. And so you have tigers and lions and monkeys. And our first trip there, before they built the highway and made it better than it was when we went the first time, we did see monkeys in the trees, and we saw all kinds of birds and all kinds of wildlife, and it was just, it's an exciting environment. But anyway, will you show some pictures of Bhutan so that, people can see what that was like?
Jamie, I think they're more of the second half pictures.
Oh,
Not, this is
And
Bolivia.
they're labeled with Bhutan.
Guys, yeah.
okay.
Probably have to go to the slide 50 or so.
That's Coach Obama.
So Barbara, with your parenting styles, we used to call that good cop, bad cop.
You got
It
it.
works every time.
You got it. Yeah, I could, remember when, Kurt was a teenager and he would always go to me because he knew I was a softie and
You're a
climbed his
good cop,
spot.
yeah.
Yeah, and, so, I mean, I was in the kitchen with Kurt and, he was trying to explain to me why I should, agree with him. And I kept saying, Kurt, I hear exactly what you're saying, but the answer is no. And then he would start again and go, but Mom, listen to this. They make up another argument. We talk all the way through it. And I go, Kurt, I heard you, but no. By the time he did it the third time, Clyde was in the living room and he said, Kurt, did you hear your mother?
Is he an attorney now?
Okay, here we go. This is a photo of Lynn and Norma Perry that we met on our first trip to Bolivia. And we traveled with them on many trips because they laughed so much. They had a good sense of humor, and we laughed our way through so many problems that we ran into because Clyde wanted to do everything that was possible to do while he was in an area, and he got us into some jams. But the three of us followed him like we were lemmings, and he was the leader. And then we laughed our way through the problems that he got us into. But this is a picture of some of the children. Go ahead, and go on.
That's you?
This is a Bhutanese dress, by the way. They gave us, Norma and I, they gave those to us as a gift before we left the country. And Clyde and Lynn bought theirs. So we have another,
It's going slow.
okay. This is the kind of landscape, when we traveled across the country, it was 20-hour drive from the capital city to where we were gonna put in the clinic. And we stopped in between at a guest house. But the beautiful scenery, you fly into Bhutan, and I was talking to Kate before the meeting that they only allow Bhutanese pilots to fly into Bhutan because you have to weave through the Himalayan mountains in order to get there. And at the time we went, Bhutan had 2 airplanes, and those pilots were trained. I was petrified really the first time, but I thought, God, do they know how close we are to these mountains? But they did it so expertly, and then they landed in a valley that was much like this, only the airport was over here. And they like went around the valley, and then they came in and they landed in this airport. And I was astonished that how beautiful it was because I saw a sight like this out the airplane window. It was gorgeous from the time we got there. Keep going now with another one. And so when we got to Tashigang, which was, Thimphu was the capital, the 20 hours away was in Tashigang. We went to a school that had about 70 children, and we examined their teeth. There was no tooth decay because they didn't have any access to sweets. All the kids' teeth were perfect. And Lynn thought that after we had given the kids toothbrushes, he decided the place of games with the kids was doing arm wrestling. And these, after he told them what it was, which they didn't know, the kids were going, I want to do it, I want to do it. And so they were jumping in there to be a part of this game that they was playing. And the teacher said, okay, it's time to go back inside and study. So they took the kids away and they went in there. But then here's another doorway that gives you the colorful nature of how it was. Go ahead, Judy. And they're the school children going there and they have their little outfits and things. Choose a button. Ugin had a daughter named Sonam, who was 11 or 12 years old when he first went to Bhutan. And she's now all grown and she was a big part of our life, has always been a big part of our life. But it was Ugin and Sangye's daughter. And by the way, these people were all named by the monks. And so Sonam's name was the name of children. We met two little boys in Bhutan who were adorable. And they did some dancing and singing for us. And anyway, both of their names were Sonam. And each of the names has a meaning, which Sonam means lucky. And so Clyde and I got Bhutanese names one time because Ugin saw a monk back there that was a lama for the area. He rushed us into the place there, the airport, where we got Bhutanese names. So I have no idea what Clyde's was, but mine was Pemadichan, and it means peaceful lotus. So I thought, well, you know, I'm pretty mellow. And in the villages outside the city, people don't have furniture. You sit on the floor and you eat, and they don't use utensils. They just put their food on the plate, and they make a ball out of the rice, and then they add the vegetables, and then they just eat that. And I tried it one time with Sonam. I said, I'm gonna figure out, you know, how that feels to eat food that way. So we made some rice together and put some vegetables with it, and I ate it, and I thought, you know what? This tastes kind of better, because you're just getting it from your hand to your mouth, and it was a pretty neat experience. Of course, when you're finished, you're covered with food, so you gotta hand washing is definitely necessary. But this is a house that, to me, looked a lot like the house that the Queen Mother lived in. And so she wasn't in some glorious castle or something, but this was a Bhutanese home with the garden all around it. It was typical of the buildings that we saw over there. Go ahead. And then this is when we did the dental clinic. The biggest thing that there were government officials and the High Lama for that district, and all these people came in to inaugurate the dental clinic. There were 2 chairs, and the hit of the day was that they all wanted to ride up and down in the dental chairs. And then this is a farmer person that was carrying wood and things for her home. Go ahead, Jenny. And this is a good, gives you a good idea of the dress that they wore. And the colorful nature of it, we saw people like that every day. And this is the High Lama from the district when we were there. And then these are 2 government officials with them. Go ahead. And we had roadside picnics. This is Sangye and Ugin. That was our guide. And Sangye was with the Queen Mother. And that's Norma and Sonam. And we would stop by the roadside and eat because they didn't have restaurants there. And then the Buddhism is very prevalent in Bhutan. And they had, we would see monks everywhere. And this is, they blow those long horns and things for festivals and whatnot. And then they're chanting as well. They chant and play those instruments. And it vibrates in your, you get a vibration in yourself, a resonance, I guess, of that sound when they play those things. Go ahead, Jenny. And this is more of how it looked as we were crossing the country. It was just gorgeous. And there's another monk. Go ahead, Jenny, the next one. And this was just a group of Bhutanese people, and I think this was when we visited a flower show that they started having when we went over there with St. Richard. They have taken this picture, but it shows the Bhutanese dress and also how colorful it was. And in the homes, they would have their own altar so that people would say their prayers before their own altar that was built in the house. Keep going. And this was Clyde. Funny Clyde. He decided he'd show off for Lynn and Norma. And so he did this for their benefit. I think that's the end of the Bhutanese, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now to South America. When we went to Bolivia, the first trip that we made, we were at home, and Clyde got the American Dental Association magazine. And in there, they had this piece where there was a dentist from Minnesota, David Crane, who wanted to take dentists from all over the United States. He wanted volunteers to go with him to Bolivia, to Cochabamba, in order to take his dental equipment and set it up in Cochabamba so that we could serve those children that were in those orphanages in Cochabamba. So I don't know whether Clyde was in Rotary at that time or not. I don't think he was, but he was headed that direction because Lynn and Norma well, first of all, I have to say, there were people that volunteered to go on that trip from all over the United States. And then Clyde and I were looking at it. Our kids were like in junior high and high school. And we said, geez, we've never been out of a couple different states in the United States. And so we said, let's do that. That sounds great. Let's go to South America. So we went down there, and we had a guy that was so full of himself. Father Fritz was the uncle of David Crane, who was a dentist that was taking these supplies down there. And Father Fritz had been in Bolivia for 50 years. It was hilarious. So he took us everywhere that we went in Cochabamba. And can we switch to the pictures of Cochabamba? We had Richard and Ann. Richard was an endodontist, and we spent time where the guys went to the dental school and taught. We did dentistry on the children when we were there. Then we went to the orphanages, and here we are. We'd given them toothbrushes. They had lessons on how to brush their teeth. And the program, by the way, in Bolivia started with that first trip that we took in 1989. We were trying to educate those kids and do dentistry on them and improve their teeth. Unfortunately, they had a very easy access to sugar. And so there was a lot of dental decay and problems with that down in Bolivia. So let's go on from there. And we met the cutest little kids in their nursery. We women one day would go and take care of these children and just pick them up and love them to pieces. And the next one be in line, so we pick out another cute one and hold them because they were so adorable. And it was such a great pleasure to do that as a mother of a child. And here they're potty training. They're just so cute. They're all lined up. Okay, it's time to do potty. So it's like group lessons in eating and pottying and everything else. Go on with the next one. And then there was a time when Robert Heron was a neighbor of ours, and he's an oral surgeon. And he was pretending to give John Behringer that, now that really looks like you, right, John? And he was pretending to give us a shot. And then Bhutan was or surgeon,
Periodontist.
periodontist, excuse me, periodontist. And, he actually was, he was doing, general dentistry. Kate called my attention to this. The oral surgeon, the, endodont, or Richard's the endodontist, the periodontist, we had like orthodontist, all these guys have been away from their dental school for a long, long time because they had their specialties. They were doing billings for the first time since 30 years ago when they were in dental schools. They were doing these billings. And we women were helping. Go to another slide. Clyde taught me how to do sealants on children's teeth. And so Ann Pocott was helping me, and Susan Aaron was there. And also Kate was working on sealants. This child was crying like crazy when we put him in the chair. And just as soon as I started to put the sealants on his teeth, he went to sleep.
Yep.
So I slept through the whole thing. He didn't have any reason to cry. And then, let's go on to another one. These children that we worked on, they would give them the syringe that they were going to be numbed up with. And they're standing in a line waiting to get in the chair, holding a syringe.
No.
I wouldn't want to hold a syringe. There was nothing to these kids. They weren't paying any attention to it. And Kate was saying if her son, Pete, and her son, if Karen's son, Mike, thank you, Mike and Peter had
They
been
would
there.
have been
they would've
shooting each other.
These things. And these children were so well behaved, they just did this, whatever we told them. Well, Frank was assisting Richard that day, and I remember Richard telling me, he said, he's supposed to be sucking spit out of here, and he told me that Frank, he said, Frank, you're blocking the light. He got his head in front of the light, and Richard was using to see the teeth. So anyway, I had to back him off from that. Father Fritz, as I said, was a real character. He introduced us to this Spanish word, cerveza, which means beer, and which we had a lot of when we were there. And he took us to this restaurant where they
Pisco
had
sour.
an entire pig that they had roasted. So that was a banquet, and then during that banquet, we were upstairs and a wedding party was downstairs at the same time. So it was a party time for everyone. Go ahead with the next slide. That's us at that same place where we had the dinner. And this fellow was a technician with the dental supply company. And he went down there a couple times with us to make sure that all the equipment, equipment was in working order. And then this is one of the married old missionaries that is singing with the children down there. We'll go on. And then this is an adorable, the children were all adorable. Just wanted to love them to pieces because their eyes and all that, the dark eyes and dark hair, much like Bhutan, is so captivating. And then here, the guys would purposely have their shoes shine because these kids didn't have a way of earning any money. And so Frank and Robert would go there, and Frank was one of the ones that he went around. We would lose Frank for hours at a time. But he was out figuring out ways to give these kids money. You know, he was looking for opportunities to help other people when we were there. Keep going. And now this is one of the highlights of our trip. Of all the people that went down there on this particular trip, I happened to be in the back of that bus. I had a very smooth trip up. Clyde decided we should go up 18,000 feet to the highest peak in Cochabamba, where it was a ski lift place. And so I didn't know it because I was in the back of the bus but two of our wheels were on that road and two of them weren't.
Oh.
Or they would have been there. So there was, Susan Heron was leaning against the side where the rocks would be, trying to counterweight the girl off of the cliffside. And I was oblivious, and Kate told me it was
crying.
Right. And you said it was the scariest experience of your life, right?
It was the scariest experience of my life.
That, yeah.
And I was
So-
sitting next to her and I,
And I was crying, he was crying too.
And as I said, I had no idea. I thought, oh, all's right in the world. I was in the back.
You would
Had
look
no
down
idea.
2 miles.
So go to the next slide. And then the guys all decided that they would, they did not take a group P, but we kept it.
Oh, I think they did. I think they did.
And then this is a picture of the market. We went to see the people in the marketplace, and you had to take their picture when they didn't know it, because they thought you were taking a part of their soul if you took their picture. So you had to hide and take a picture of them, but they would often bring their children to the market, have little kids sitting there while they were trying to sell vegetables and all different kinds of goods in the market. And side trips, we went to Lake Titicaca was one of them, and it was the highest fresh mountain lake, Richard,
Yeah,
fill me
freshwater.
in. Highest freshwater lake, and that was in Bolivia. And to just give you an idea, the side trips that we took when we were in Bhutan were to, hold on. We went to, this is Lake Titicaca. We went to Argentina. We went to a tango show that was remarkable, and it's very sexy. And afterwards, I remember dancing with Van Vagianos, who did the tango with me. I was so honored. And we went to have a gaucho thing on the outside of Buenos Aires. And then Ernie Ryder was a runner. This guy didn't know it. He stole Ernie's wallet when we were in Buenos Aires, and Ernie chased him. He chased the guy down, and he got his wallet back to the guy. So anyway, we went there, and we took a trip to Brazil, and then we saw one of the most phenomenal things was Iguazu Falls. It was the most beautiful. Clyde had a falls fixation. We went all over the world to see waterfalls and all over North Carolina. But this waterfalls at Iguazu Falls is unique because it's 2 miles wide, and there's vegetation growing all the way in the water around there. And there was a movie called The Mission made at that place because it's so beautiful. And in the movie, someone goes over the waterfalls. I don't remember whether it was a priest or someone that was following a priest, but it was a part of the movie. There were, as we got on boats to go close to that waterfalls, there were butterflies all over the shoreline. And it was just stunning to see those butterflies there. So, that was so memorable and such a privilege to be able to go there. And so we had that whole variety of experiences. And I want to circle back from all the wonderful things that the people gave to us in Bolivia and Bhutan, and tell you how when Clyde died on Labor Day in 2001, that was, it was a huge part of me that left. It was like hearing about Jessica last week, that Clyde and I were so close. and did all these things together. And we were, he was a planning person, and I was the person in the background that said, Clyde, I think the people would enjoy doing this next. Let's break it up and do this. And so I was kind of I was a counselor in schools and at the community college, so I had sensitivity to people and what the needs might be. So anyway, when he died, I felt like I wanted to write about him because he was an amazing person and a figure that I thought more people should know about him and know about Bhutan than just us and the group that traveled with us all the time. So when I started, I thought, well, I don't know how to write a book. I don't know how to write about Clyde. So I met a friend in a centering prayer class where she wrote poetry books. And I thought her poetry was wonderful. So I said, Glenn, I love your books. These are wonderful. And I said, how did you learn to do this? She told me about an organization called Charlotte Lit, where they do volunteer classes they do poetry teaching, they do artistic classes, they teach English as a second language. They did, the course that I took was on writing. So I went to a class that was on writing. It was 6 to 9 at night. And I thought, oh Lord, I'm not gonna make it from 6 to 9. I'm gonna be, I might have to leave early. Well, I got in there and the teacher was so much fun and so interactive with the group that I loved it. And I thought, geez, this is really neat. Well, then she sent me an email asking me if I wanted to join a writing class. And I went, oh, never thought of that. Sure, I'll take a writing class. So I went there and there were about 6 other women. And each time we met, we brought a writing that we wrote. And Maureen's standard, she was our teacher, was that we would give positive feedback to the person's piece that they wrote, and we would read it to each other, which gave me a lot of courage because I was embarrassed about my writing initially. And so when the people in the group laughed every time I brought a piece about Bhutan and they wanted to hear what was next, I thought, really, this is getting pretty darn interesting. They like this. And so it gave me the courage and the impetus to go forward. And I studied privately with Maureen for a while to complete this book called Enchanting Bhutan, which describes Clyde's hilarious ways because he was so funny that we traveled. He had this thing where if he got near a place, he wanted to go there. So the trip to Bhutan, we flew to Kathmandu. So we couldn't fly just from, they only had 2 flights, maybe 1 flight a week at that time. And we were there much earlier. So Clyde, we go to Kathmandu and we toured around for a day. And I thought that was really interesting. And Clyde and Lynn and Norma didn't think it was so great. It was dirty, but hey, I thought culture is very unique. And they said, let's go, Clyde said, let's go to Hong Kong. We said, okay, let's go to Hong Kong. So we get tickets and we fly to Hong Kong. So we walk around there for a day and Clyde says, well, you know what? This is too Western, it was so westernized at that time. And we had Mrs. Fields cookies, so hey. So he said, Clyde says, why don't we go to China? We could go there on a train ride. We could just get to China in one day and go up there and see what that's like. So we ended up going to what used to be Canton, is now Guangzhou, China. And so, every place we just kept going and learning something every place we went. And eventually made our way back to Kathmandu so that we'd actually go to Bhutan. But I read about all of that in the book, about how adventurous Clyde was and how he was always getting us into trouble with all his energy going that direction. And so I wrote the book, which will be available on January 14th, Valentine's Day. But in closing this part, I want to read you what an independent writer wrote about the book. She read it, and what she said was, Enchanting Bhutan provides the reader with a unique dialogue or travelogue memoir that is told with warmth, humor, and depth. The author, Barbara, and her dentist husband, Clyde, along with another dentistry couple, embark on a series of adventures and misadventures as they make their way to the small and at that time primitive country of Bhutan, located in the Himalaya Mountains, to set up a dental clinic. Death-defying travel, strange food and customs, and human foibles that other travelers may have found daunting were taken on by group leader Clyde with a positivity and love of people that showed no bounds. Told in a flowing conversational style, you will immediately feel that you are traveling right along with the foursomes and their newly found Bhutanese friends. Most importantly, Mrs. Horstmann demonstrates how the experience of having visited Bhutan, which places compassion and a simple, harmonious lifestyle as its priorities, gave her own life a new direction and meaning. This poignant yet entertaining story may even do the same for you. So I want to say that that's the end and our time's up. But I want to tell you, since everybody's, nobody, if you need to run out the door, run out the door. But we had so many funny things happen when we went with all of our trips. The first thing I'll tell you is about when Clyde and Ernie Ryder and Jim Hintz went to, Ernie actually had the idea of trying to put fluoridation on salt in Bolivia. And so they went to the government of Bolivia to get permission to do that. And the Bolivian government said, yes, we will definitely do that. So that was a big deal for the guys and for us. We were so excited about it. We had, there was a morning where I wasn't there. I feel like I was there, that Clyde and Ernie and who did I leave out? Clyde, Ernie, and Jim Hintz were going to have the TV station came to do an interview with them, and some journalists were there. Well, right off of that room was a bathroom, and so there was no separation. The room and the bathroom's right there, the door. So Ernie had chosen to get eggs sunny side up for breakfast. So when we get to they got to the time when they were in the going to meet with the camera crew, Ernie had to go to the bathroom. So he goes in there, and as soon as he gets in there, they're talking, but they got very quiet when they heard all these fireworks in the bathroom. They were all these bathroom noises, and when Ernie came out, everyone was just laughing to be the band because and Ernie said, there's shit all over the walls. So that was one instance, and then
I was there.
A Frank story. We have many Frank stories. Frank was John McBaringer's roommate, and then Frank befriended an attractive woman that would hang out at our hotel. We thought she was a Rotary person, but she wasn't in Dilworth Rotary. So Frank decides he'll go out with this woman one night. So he goes out with the woman, and the woman, they go for dinner. And then the woman takes him on this ride in a taxi. They go up to the top of this mountain, and John tells a story that, hey, John did, or
I
Frank,
haven't told any stories.
Frank never came home last night. someone had taken to the top of the mountain where they had an army of armed people. I don't know whether they were bandits or whether they were actually the Bolivian army. But Frank spent time up there with this woman and they were trying to explain their way out of their situation of why they drove up this little mountain road to be with them. So anyway,
No comment from over here.
Would
you like to explain yourself?
I think that's the next, club
Yeah.
presentation.
but there are so many other funny stories. I have pages of funny stories that all the people that went told me about our trip. But is it time to conclude?
Oh, yeah.
That's what I thought. It was time. So that's the best I could do is throwing it all into one jumbo at a time.
It's giant, of course, we missed them.
Thank you, Barbara, because we listened to you much longer. So we gotta let people go.
Yeah, I could talk all afternoon.
I can't wait to read your book.
Yeah, the book is fun because, as I said, 5 was so funny, but it's very funny and it's very poignant.
We've got to have, the raffle.
Yeah, the raffle, you wanna pull the raffle ticket? And let's pass up the card buckets while we're at it. So poor Tom can get out of here to his family.
I never got to do this before.
So you agreed to speak, right?
Sure.
Okay, the last 3 numbers are 390.
390. Bingo. Yay! Now we can also do the driveway test.
No.
Congratulations.
It's always.
Of all the things we think they are due, number 1. You've been through 2. Number 3.
This.
Number 4. And number 5. And I think Barbara proved today that it would be fun.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.
Thank you, Barbara.
Glad you were here.
Bye.
Get your all of this stuff.